What happens when a husband is called controlling for asking simple questions, then stands in a public terminal where papers speak louder than stories? How do small, quiet records outlast a road trip alibi that points to a sister's house, but ends in an ex's apartment? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Calder Vane. I work at a small warehouse on the edge of town, where pallets move in clean rows and clocks matter. I like days that start and end the same way. My wife, Mira, says routine makes a man dull. I call it a promise kept. She told friends she needed a break from noise and wanted a quiet visit with her sister. I heard a plan with neat edges and missing corners. Our son, Eli, is 8. He studies faces like a book. I try to keep my own face steady for him. I also keep notes, times, and small facts that do not argue. I do not raise my voice. I keep my ring on my hand and my keys on the hook. When Mira packs a bag, she hums a bright tune and forgets small things she never forgets. She says the highway helps her think. I say safe travel and mean it. I set 2 mugs on opposite counters and rinse both. I circle a date on the wall planner without drama. I prefer clear lines to sharp words. If truth is a room, I plan to enter it by the door, not the window. I woke early and let the apartment stay quiet. The kitchen light made a soft square on the table. I set 2 mugs in their places, one near the sink and one near the stove. I poured water for myself and left hers empty because she said she might leave before sunrise. Eli padded in with his hair messy and asked if the trip would be long. I said the highway would take time. He asked if he should draw a map for her. I said a map was a kind idea. He nodded and pressed his lips together the way he does when he hides a worry. I buttered toast and placed it in halves so the plate looked friendly. I heard the bedroom zipper move. I kept my eyes on the toaster coil like it could help me count. Mira rolled her suitcase to the door and stood in her running shoes. She said her sister needed help with the new baby and the spare room. She said the bus drop-off was easier than parking. She said the weekend would be quiet. I said safe travel and meant it. I did not ask for new details. I do not argue with facts I cannot prove yet. I watched the way she looked at the wall clock more than at our faces. That told me more than words. I put Eli's drawing pad on the counter and left a pen on top. He drew a square house with a small car beside it and a tall stick figure with a ponytail. He said the figure was fast. I said the figure was strong. I opened my phone and set a calendar reminder with a neutral title, Finch 7:10 p.m. It meant nothing to anyone else. It meant I would look at my notes at that time. I placed a thin binder labeled Utilities back on the shelf. It was thicker than bills now. I kept a spreadsheet open on my laptop with only initials and dates. There were no letters, no forms, no names of offices. I heard the hallway and set my palm on the desk until the sound stopped. When the sound moved on, I minimized the window. My phone showed a brief cloud sync pop-up that said file uploaded successfully and then faded. I slid a blank page from the printer tray and placed it under the keyboard as a spacer. In the stairwell, I heard her voice at a low level. She asked someone to meet near the Riverwalk. She said the bus would be best because parking was chaos. She said the sister story was still safe. Shoes scuffed on concrete. I did not step out. I stood where the light made a small triangle and counted to 10. The stairwell door clicked and silence returned. I went back inside and rinsed both mugs. I circled a date on the wall planner without pressing too hard on the pen. Eli asked if the pen was running out. I said the pen was careful. He made a tired face and leaned on my arm. I walked to the guest room and lifted the corner of the blanket. It was slightly disturbed from the night before. The pillow had a shallow dent. It could have been nothing. It felt like a line that wants to become a word. I smoothed it with an open hand and let the fabric go still. In the entryway, the new key on her ring flashed against the door frame. I watched it leave and told myself not to build a whole story from one shine. I am not a storyteller. I am a man who stacks small facts and sees if they hold. At the warehouse, the first truck came with pallets of cleaning supplies. I signed the manifest and checked the lot number. My coworker said weekends were for lakes, not for lifting. I said weekends were for whatever keeps a home upright. He laughed like I had told a good joke. I kept loading because the day needed to move. At lunch, I sat with my back to the wall and wrote down times without names. I do not write explanations. Explanations argue. Times do not. A text preview popped from a thread named Follow-Up and vanished because my screen timed out. I did not open it. I let the preview float away like steam. Late afternoon, I stopped at the supermarket for bread and dish soap. At the checkout, a neighbor asked if Mira was away with her sister. I said yes, a short visit. The neighbor smiled with a look that tried to be kind and also tried to gather more. I did not offer more. I paid and left with the bag in my hand and a clean receipt in my pocket. Outside, wind lifted the corner of a bus schedule on the wall. The times lined up like the rows in my spreadsheet. That gave me a small calm. At home, I placed one USB stick labeled with the date under a folder marked taxes. I used a strip of tape to hold it in place on the underside of the drawer shelf. The tape made a soft pull when I pressed it. That sound felt like an answer to a question nobody had asked me yet. I moved to the balcony and watched the street for a minute. The city made the same old noise. The half moon sat above the roof lines like a coin that never falls. Inside, I set Eli's dinner and asked about his science seeds. He said the teacher said quiet helps plants grow. I said quiet helps many things grow. He nodded and ate like a small machine. Evening came and Finch 7:10 p.m. hummed on my phone. I checked my notes and added bus plan, river mention, sister cover. I added Eli's question about maps. I added the neighbor comment. I did not add how my chest felt. Feelings are true, but they take too much space on a small line. I kept the line clean. I locked the desk drawer when footsteps came, even though I was alone with Eli. The lock clicked, and I felt a thin line of safety. We read a book about trains until he fell asleep with his hand on the page. When the apartment settled, my phone lit once with a call labeled private. I let it pass. I washed both mugs and placed them on opposite counters again. It was a small ceremony, but it told me where I was. A door latch down the hall clicked very softly. I stood still and listened until the silence returned to the shape of night. I set my alarm and lay down without shoes. My mind set itself to steady. My last thought was a sentence I did not speak. I will handle this properly. I did not send it. I saved it. A muted private call lights the screen as the stairwell door latch clicks shut. Morning at the warehouse began with the beep of the dock scanner and the smell of cardboard. I signed the delivery sheet and moved pallets into straight lines. The day felt clear because the steps were simple. I kept my phone on silent in my back pocket. I do not like a loud pocket. By mid-morning, I took a short break and checked the group feed for our street. A photo sat near the top. It showed a hand with a paper cup and a bracelet I knew well. The caption said, "Sister time with a river view." The location tag was 2 stops north of the bus line to her sister's neighborhood. I saved the image without liking it. My thumb stayed flat so no heart would appear by mistake. I asked the shift lead if I could run an errand on my lunch break. He said as long as the shipments stayed ahead of schedule. I said they would. I drove to the co-working cafe near Mira's office. It is a place where people pretend not to watch each other. I ordered black coffee and stood by the window. On the far side, a small group laughed at a reel about weekend freedom. The sound of their laughter made a soft wall. I could not hear the words, but I could hear the shape. On a laptop by the plant, a frame paused on a shoulder I recognized. It was narrow and carried a camera strap. I did not step closer. I let the information come to me the way smoke comes under a door. A message popped on my phone from a number saved as a single emoji. The preview said almost there with the river emoji. I did not open it. I took a blank napkin and wrote the time. I folded the napkin and placed it in my pocket. I heard the espresso machine hiss and decided I had seen enough of this room. Back outside, I walked a block to reset my eyes. A bus rolled by with an ad about trust. I watched it pass because I needed the joke to finish itself. I visited the loading dock office at a nearby supplier and asked about a spare pallet wrap. The manager said he liked to help the city men. I said I was only a small warehouse hand. He said small hands keep big things from falling. That line stayed with me as I drove back. At the warehouse, my shift lead asked if everything was good. I said everything was moving. He nodded like that was enough. We tipped 3 more pallets and signed them off. The scanner beeped at the right rhythm and kept me sane. When my lunch ended, I opened my laptop at the break room table and typed 2 lines into the spreadsheet. I used initials and dates only. I minimized the window when footsteps came near. One of the guys asked if my wife liked the lake. I said she liked quiet places. He said the river is not quiet on Saturdays. I said some people hear quiet when they want to. He laughed and went to the vending machine. I added a small note to a text file and watched the Cloud Sync pop-up blink out as if it did not want to be seen. In the late afternoon, I went to the supermarket again because Eli wanted spaghetti. At the checkout, the cashier said I looked tired and said coffee helps. I said the day was long. Behind me, a couple whispered about a video they had seen. I did not look. I paid and moved on. In the parking lot, a car door slammed. Footsteps paused, then turned away. I took a breath and counted to 4. The air smelled like warm metal and tomatoes. It was a normal smell. I like normal smells. At home, I found the wall planner where I left it. I circled a second date with the same light pressure. I set a phone alarm labeled paper drop and turned the volume down. I added a new calendar entry with a plain title, Laurel 2:40 p.m. Eli spread his homework on the table and asked for help with a word problem. He asked if two cars leave the same place, would they reach the same point? I said it depends on the route and the speed. He nodded like that was deep wisdom. I watched him press his pencil hard and then softer. He learns control one stroke at a time. Mira's mother, Ada, called while I was stirring the sauce. She said she heard Mira was giving herself a little freedom. She said marriages need air. She said I run the house like a schedule, not a heart. I said I keep the house clean for a child who likes clean. She said I should soften. I said I am already soft enough to be quiet. She said that was passive. I said it was careful. She sighed in a way that called me stubborn without using the word. I let the sigh go to the wall and fall. I finished the sauce and set the table. Later, Eli asked if a sister weekend means a hug from the aunt. I said I hoped so. He asked why the river was in the picture. I said cities have many rivers and many phones. He accepted that like a weather report. We ate in peace because the forks kept us busy. After dinner, he brought me a small plant he sprouted at school. He said it needed steady light and steady water. I said we would put it near the window and count the days. He smiled in a straight line and looked relieved. Night came, and with it, the balcony. I stepped out and held the rail. The city hummed. I opened my phone and looked at the photo again. The bracelet was in focus. The cup had a logo from a cafe near the co-working space. The reflection of the photographer sat in the glass behind the wrist. The camera strap crossed a neat black jacket. The shoulders sloped the way I remembered from a holiday long ago when names were easier. I saved the file with the time and slipped the phone into my pocket. I smelled the faint scent of printer toner in the room behind me. That meant the machine had warmed at some point. I did not rush to check. I placed a single blank page into the tray and watched it feed forward and stop. I put the page in a folder as a simple bookmark in time. I slid the thin utilities binder back into place beside household and bank. I tapped the spine with 2 fingers. It was a habit I learned from counting boxes. It calms me. I set my laptop on the desk and opened a clean tree named Archive A and Archive B. I dropped a text file into Archive B. The CloudSync banner blinked and vanished. I closed the lid when footsteps came down the hall. The drawer lock clicked once as I turned the key. The stairwell outside our door made a soft echo. A hallway call in a low voice rose and fell and then cut off. I heard the elevator stop at our floor and then continue. I stayed still, not because I was afraid, but because stillness keeps lines straight. I texted a single sentence to Mira. I will handle this properly. The read receipt appeared and held. There was no reply. I washed both mugs and set them on opposite counters again. I am a patient man. Patience is not surrender. It is a tool. Before bed, I checked Eli's plant one more time and turned it a quarter turn so the stem would not bend to the window. He said the teacher taught that trick. I said the teacher was wise. He asked if people bend to windows too. I said people bend to stories. He said he liked facts better. I said me too. He looked satisfied and went to brush his teeth. I stood at the door and watched the small steam lift into the light. The apartment felt like a pause between notes. I let the pause be long. A manager's quick word request pings Mira's phone as a new reel tag pops, and my phone alarm named Paper Drop hums softly. The riverside looked like a postcard that wanted attention. Food trucks lined the path. Lights hung between poles like a low sky. A small crowd formed near a pop-up stage where a local band tuned guitars. I took Eli to the bookstall first. He picked a thin science guide and traced a diagram about roots. I told him we would read it later. I kept my eyes soft and my steps even. I did not hunt. I observed. The air smelled like sugar and damp wood. The river moved at its usual speed. A phone camera moves faster than any river. I remembered that and kept my shoulders level. Near the railing, I saw Mira with 2 co-workers. She wore a bright scarf that made her easy to find. She laughed toward a lens and leaned away at the last second so the camera would want more. A man stood a little behind, face turned, camera strap on his shoulder. The strap was familiar. The slope of his jacket was familiar. I watched the angles and did not chase a name. Names can start fights. Angles only add lines. A friend lifted a cup and called for a quick toast to sisters who save weekends. The group cheered like a cue card had been raised off stage. Eli tugged my sleeve and asked if the river could be measured. I said everything can be measured if you choose the right unit. He nodded and said he would measure by ducks. He counted 2 ducks and then started over when a third landed. His voice steadied me. I walked him toward the snack stall and bought a small lemonade. I set the cup on the table and wiped the rim because sticky hands make him anxious. Behind us, the group's laughter rose and fell. I let the sound pass through me like wind. A reel began on the coworker's screen. The caption said, "Sister Weekend, Dusk Edition," and I saw the cameraman's hand in the reflection. His thumb brushed a strand of hair off the edge of Mira's scarf as if he had a right. The gesture was small, but small things carry weight. I watched the cursor hover on the post button. I saw a location tag blink that did not live in Sasha's neighborhood. I saved the timestamp in my head and did not move my feet. I do not run at fish. I marked the water. Mira spotted Eli and waved like she wanted a photo with him. He waved back and held his lemonade with 2 hands. I did not walk closer. I stood where the shadow of the bridge met the path and let the shadow cool my back. A woman from the office asked if I was giving his mother space tonight. I said I was giving my son steady air. She smirked like she had won a small game. The camera strap lifted again. The man framed Mira with the lights. I saw his jaw in profile and filed it with the jacket slope. The band hit a clean chord. A chant rose for a toast to new seasons. People around us lifted cups at once, like the sky told them what to do. A phone light flared across Mira's face. She looked toward me, then looked away in a practiced arc. She leaned into the group and said something quick that made them laugh again. I watched her mouth form a word that could have been old, could have been free, could have been mine from years ago when we were gentle with time. I held the rail and kept my breath simple. I guided Eli to the quieter end of the path. He asked if ducks ever get tired. I said they rest in reeds. He asked if people have reeds. I said people have doors. We passed a chalk mural where kids wrote their names. Eli wrote his first name small and clear. He does not make letters shout. A bus rolled over the bridge, and I counted the seconds between the rumble and its echo. I like to match sounds to numbers. Numbers tell me where I am. I checked my phone and saw a group chat explode with 3 short pings. A clip had already jumped to a few thousand views. A comment said the cameraman looked like the photographer boyfriend. Another asked if the sister was behind the lens. A third tagged the cafe near the co-working space. I did not respond. I saved the clip and put my phone away. I do not pour words onto a fire I did not start. We went back toward the main path to leave. The band paused. The crowd shifted. The cameraman turned with Mira and took 2 steps toward the parking garage stair. His hand hovered near the small of her back, not touching, but rehearsing. Eli asked if we could get seed packets at the plant stall on the way out. I said yes and handed him the bills. I let him make the purchase alone to feel strong. He returned with a paper envelope and a smile that made the lights seem less loud. At the garage, the echo felt like a box over the night. Footsteps followed ours and then paused. I stopped by the pay station to tie my shoe. The pause turned into a cough and then into retreat. I looked at the concrete at my feet and saw a smear of chalk from a kid's drawing dragged by rain. I placed that color in my head like a pin. I do not know why I keep small pins. They help. We drove home on the slow streets. Eli fell asleep before we hit the 3rd light. I carried him up the stairs and felt his weight like a promise. In the kitchen, I set 2 mugs on opposite sides again. I washed both and left them to dry. I opened my laptop and typed the time and place in the spreadsheet. I added bridge echo 7 seconds, because that is how my brain keeps the film straight. I dropped a short note into Archive B and watched the Cloud Sync banner show, "File uploaded successfully." I closed the lid when the hallway floor creaked. I locked the drawer with the soft click that marks a boundary. I stood at the wall planner and circled a date that was already in my head. I did not press hard. The circle did not need to shout to be real. I set a calendar reminder with a plain title, Harbor, 8:55 a.m. It meant look at your lines after you drop Eli at school. I put the phone down and heard the printer warm for a second, then stop. The smell of toner lifted into the room and faded. I kept my voice inside. I kept my plan inside. A chant for a toast swells, a phone camera flash pops, the elevator bell in the parking garage dings as footsteps pause behind us. The family lunch came 2 days later at a long table beside a window that watched the street. Ada arrived early with a gift bag and a plan. She hugged Eli and told him he was a strong boy who lets adults be brave. She looked at me and waited. I said we were well and kept my hands still on the table. Mira sat near the middle, bright again, scarf folded into a neat knot. A cousin asked about the sister weekend and said the river looked pretty. The cousin raised a phone and tried to find the clip. I asked if we could let Eli enjoy his pasta hot. The cousin lowered the phone with a face that wanted to say I was no fun. Bread baskets moved and small jokes slid around like coins. Mira said she needed space to think about careers and home roles. She said a sister weekend clears the mind. She said I took routines too seriously. I said routines keep the roof on. I did not raise my tone. Ada said men who cling to order make women shrink. Ruth, my mother, arrived then, set down her bag, and sat by Eli. She placed 2 fingers on my shoulder in a way that said, "Hold the line." I held it. Eli asked if the sister lives by a river. Mira said yes, then backtracked and said she visited a cafe near the river first. The cousin smiled like that fix landed. Ruth asked if the cafe was where the cameraman worked. It was not a sharp question. It was a soft tap on a fragile place. Mira said co-workers and friends meet everywhere. Ada said times are modern and people change. Jonah texted me from the other end of the table and told me to say the name. I put my phone face down and breathed. The pasta arrived. Eli's came with basil he does not like. I pulled the leaves off and placed them on my plate. He ate with focus and let the room talk over him. I watched the way he watched Mira's hands when she spoke. Children read hands like subtitles. Olga from the extended side asked if we were trying a trial separation to see if absence helps. I said we were keeping our child safe and schedules clear. She said my words sounded like a memo. I said I work with memos and they save time. Some people do not like simple lines because simple lines reveal gaps. Ruth asked Mira if a joke at the river had turned into a habit. She asked if a habit had turned into a story and whether the story still left room for a child's piece. The table shifted. Mira said everyone was overreacting to shared air. She said people saw what they wanted. She said I liked being a victim. The words sat on the table like a glass that had been dropped and did not break, only rang. I let the ring fade. I am not a victim. I am a man who pays attention. Eli asked me in a small voice if boyfriend means not family. He did not look at anyone else. He watched my face for the rule. I said boyfriend is a word adults use when they forget other words. I said family is a job, not a caption. I said his place is safe. He nodded and pushed his plate forward for more. Ruth's eyes softened like a curtain that lets light in. Ada shook her head and said I was poisoning the room with formality. I said I was giving the room clean air. I reached for the water and poured for Mira first because my hands still know their lessons. When the plates were cleared, the cousin tried again to play the reel. A frame froze where a reflection showed a jacket and a camera strap. Ada said reflections lie. Ruth said reflections tell truth when people refuse to. Sasha called to say happy birthday to Ada and asked if she could talk to Mira later. Her voice came through the speaker, thin and careful. She said, in a way that did not pick a fight, that she had not hosted anyone last weekend. The table went quiet in a loud way. Mira said connection was bad and ended the call. The cousin stared at her phone and scrolled. I paid the tip and stood to help Eli with his jacket. The room's buzz tried to tangle around our feet. I walked him outside and into cheap winter sun. He asked if we could go to the playground for 10 minutes before homework. I said yes. We crossed to the small park behind the restaurant. A swing stood empty. He pumped his legs like a machine and found sky. I let the chain creak write a steady note. A mother I know from school came by and said she saw a video. She said the internet is unkind. I said we keep our child out of it. She said that was wise. She pushed her stroller on. I kept my eyes on the swing set screws, silver and strong. At the school pickup line the next day, the air had that hallway quiet that people make outside, a hush with edges. 2 parents spoke to each other in a way that wanted to be near me without being at me. I did not help them. The door opened and kids ran out like marbles. Eli came in a straight line and put his hand in mine without words. That is a bond that noise cannot break. We walked home and talked about the plant. He said it liked the window. I said we could turn it a quarter turn again tonight. He smiled because small turns feel like control. At home, I stood by the wall planner. I red-circled the date again, a little darker, not because I was angry, but because I want the ink to hold. I took a photo of a document that was not a form, only a page with times and notes. I tucked the photo deep in the phone gallery. I opened the laptop and added 2 entries to the spreadsheet: river toast, reflection, family table words. I closed the sheet when I heard a foot on the hall. I placed a single USB stick labeled with the day's date under the taxes folder with fresh tape. My fingers were steady. The smell of printer toner lived lightly in the air again. The printer spit a blank page when I woke it, as if to show me the drum was alive. I slid the page into a folder as a marker and shut the drawer until the latch clicked. I set a new calendar reminder with another plain title, Kite 12:30 p.m. It meant review notes after lunch tomorrow. It meant control the pace. It meant do not let your pulse lead. Mira walked past the doorway and said the family was dramatic. She said I was making people choose sides. She said she needed air. I said I give air. I said I will handle this properly. I did not say more. That night, Eli asked again if boyfriend means not family. He asked it with less fear and more logic, as if testing the word like a math problem. I told him family is a set, and sets have rules. I told him rules guard the center. He said he likes sets. He brushed his teeth with careful strokes. He placed his plant by the window and turned it the agreed quarter turn. He smiled like the world still made sense wherever his hands could touch. I tucked him in and stood in the hall until his breath went even. I stepped onto the balcony and let the city hum. I opened the phone and watched the river clip without the sound. The hand brushed the scarf again. The reflection did not lie. I saved the time and put the phone down. Inside, the house was a map I knew by touch. I walked it once. Mugs on opposite counters, guest bed smooth, drawer locked, binders aligned, Archive A and Archive B clean on the screen. A cloud sync pop-up blinked and left. I breathed in and out and felt my decision settle into place. A child's quiet question lingers. A muted, private call lights the screen and goes dark as the door latch clicks in the hall. The community center smelled like citrus cleaner and old varnish. A table near the stage held raffle baskets wrapped in cellophane. I signed the volunteer sheet and set out paper cups. I do not like to be the story in a room. I like to be the person who stacks things straight. Mira walked in later than the flyer time, in a bright jacket meant for photos. Neighbors greeted her with energy that felt borrowed. A small circle formed. Someone said, "Sister trips give life." Someone said, "Freedom looks good." Their eyes slid toward me like a camera that pretends to be looking at a wall. I poured water and kept my posture even. Ruth stood at the far end by the sign-in clipboard. She read the lines like a poem and then looked at me with the expression that says, "Stay steady." Jonah arrived from the gym, still in a jacket with a logo, and asked if I needed him to speak. I said I needed him to be my brother and keep his voice for another day. He nodded because he knows that when I say day, I mean a date, not a mood. He said he was nearby. I said I knew. We did not hug. We do not use gestures like wires in public rooms. A neighbor with a loud scarf asked me if we were trying trial co-parenting. She delivered the phrase like a coupon. I said we were raising our son with care and schedule. She smiled and said that sounded like a memo. I said memos stop people from getting lost. On the stage, a teenager tested a microphone and declared the raffle open. The room clapped as if the clapping would cancel quiet. I placed a basket of pens at the end of the signing line and turned each pen so the clips faced the same direction. It helps me to make small rows in the world. By the bake sale table, Mira laughed with two co-workers. One asked if the river had been as pretty as the video. She said the city always looks best from the right angle. Another asked if her sister loved the surprise. She said family sometimes needs a story first. The word story sat in my ear like a thin stone. I watched a phone rise, then lower. I did not walk closer. I listened to the low rubber squeak of shoes on the court next door and let that sound anchor me. After the raffle, I took Eli to the art station. He drew a rectangle with 4 small circles under it. He said it was a bus with good brakes. He added a driver with a calm face. He said calm faces keep the whole road safe. I told him his drawing made sense. I folded the paper when he was done and slid it into his backpack. He asked if we could plant seeds tomorrow morning. I said yes after breakfast, near the window. He smiled and counted the crayons back into the box with serious care. We left before the cleanup ended. In the kitchen at home, I set 2 mugs on opposite counters, then washed both. I dried them with separate towels and placed them back in their locations because that is how I measure the house now. On the desk, I opened the laptop and placed 2 folders side by side, Archive A and Archive B. I dropped a short file into Archive B with the time of the chant at the river, the reflection in the glass, the family table words from the cousin, and the community hall comments from tonight. I used initials and dates only. The Cloud Sync pop-up appeared and said file uploaded successfully. It vanished like a polite guest. I taped a single USB stick labeled with today's date under the taxes folder inside the drawer. The tape made a quiet pull. I slid the drawer shut until the latch clicked. I placed a blank sheet into the printer and tapped the panel to wake it. The printer spit out a blank page. I slid that page into a binder as a thin bookmark in time. The binder was labeled Utilities and sat thicker than bills beside Household and Bank. I do not open it for comfort. I open it to remind myself that order can be built. On the wall planner, I red-circled a date I had already circled light before. This time, the line was a little darker. It was not anger, it was ink. I set a calendar reminder with a plain title, Rowan 4:45 p.m. The phone gave a soft haptic tap. I added another for the morning. Finch, 9:15 a.m. Titles mean nothing to anyone else. They mean review, breathe, confirm to me. A sticky note near the monitor read, "Bring forms." It was not a call to action, it was a posture. From the hall, I heard a low voice on a call, then the quiet beep of a recording app starting somewhere. I cannot fix other people's devices. I can control my steps. I moved to the balcony and let the city hum through the rail. I opened messages and typed a single sentence to Mira. I will handle this properly. The read receipt appeared. No reply came. I set the phone face down and watched the window across the street turn off like a tired eye. When I came back inside, Jonah's text waited. "Want me to talk to Ada?" I answered, "No. Keep clean lines." Ruth wrote, "Dignity is not silence. It is timing." I wrote, "Understood." I made tea and listened for the shredder. The hum began faintly from the other room, then stopped. I washed my cup and set it upside down to dry. I moved through the apartment and checked small things that tell the truth. Guest bed smooth and cool, door chain at the same notch, mail flipped with the envelope seams upward. These tiny checks do not save a marriage. They save my mind. Eli came out for water and asked if plants grow better when people are calm. I said roots like steady ground. He said he will be a root then. I told him roots are brave because they hold without being seen. He liked that and went back to bed. I wrote his sentence into the file with the time and nothing more. I closed the laptop as footsteps moved in the hall. The door latch clicked once and settled. I stood at the counter and thought about windows and doors. Windows show what people want to show. Doors decide who can come in. I am done standing at windows. I will use the door that belongs to me. I rinsed my hands and looked at the sink shine. I do not need anyone to agree that water is water. I only need to act when the meter says go. I turned off the kitchen light. The apartment narrowed to lines I could keep. I spoke one line to the empty room to make it true in my own ears. I will handle this properly. A hallway call in a low voice fades. The door latch settles. A printer spools and produces a single blank page. I repeat that I will handle it properly. The Rivergate Bus Terminal has a ceiling that makes voices thin. The tiles shine even when the day outside is dull. I arrived early and stood near the timetable boards where the numbers roll in clean rows. Hal, the station supervisor, nodded from his desk and went back to his clipboard. People moved with bags and coffees and the posture of small missions. A kiosk printer clicked and fed out a narrow strip of paper. The sound marked the hour better than any clock. I stood with my back to a pillar and kept my hands in front of me. I do not like pockets when my heart works hard. The morning crowd thickened, then sorted itself as departures were called. I watched the doors to the street. I watched the escalator. I watched the reflection in the glass above the newsstand, because reflections tell me what I cannot see straight on. I do not hunt, I observe. Mira came in from the street with a fast step, 2 co-workers in her wake. The bright scarf had become a habit. She looked up at the boards and smiled like the day was hers. The co-workers checked their phones and drifted toward the coffee line. Ada entered a moment later from the taxi drop and scanned the room. She carried worry like fragrance. She spotted Mira and raised her hand. They met near the center tiles where the light made a clean square. The server stepped forward on a path that was not dramatic, only clear. The check was careful and ordinary. Identity was confirmed in a voice low enough that it did not break the morning. Hal looked up. He is a man who has watched many things pass through a concourse. He kept his face neutral and his pen steady. A bus hissed from a far bay. The concourse chime sounded once, a note that hangs and fades. Mira's fingers tightened when the packet touched her hand. Her face held steady for one beat, then looked left toward Ada as if the room would edit the moment. The co-workers turned from the coffee line because rooms like this share news without trying. A woman near the newsstand lowered a newspaper. A child tugged a sleeve and asked for a snack. The world kept doing what it does. The action in the center tile was not a television show. It was a simple line becoming a line on paper in public air. I did not speak. I did not signal victory. I do not use that word for a house that is breaking. I stayed where my shoes had chosen to stand. The point was not to hurt a person in front of witnesses. The point was to put truth in daylight where rumor had lived. The packet included temporary orders that make possession and money clear until the longer process speaks. It included custody planning so Eli's routines would be a wall, not an argument. The packet was not a lesson. It was a map. Ada's mouth formed a small circle and then closed. She looked at me and then at the floor. A bus door folded open at Bay 4 and a line moved forward with the patient rhythm of travel. The kiosk printer at the ticket counter whirred again. Hal made a note on his clipboard. The concourse chime pinged once more. Mira's hand trembled, then locked. She did not look at me directly. She looked at my reflection in the glass and then looked down. I turned toward the revolving doors, not fast, not slow. I walked into the street air where the day smelled like cold and diesel. I did not look back to taste the faces. I do not eat that kind of food. I breathed in 4 counts and out 4 counts and felt the numbers hold. People on the sidewalk moved with coffee and plans that had nothing to do with me. A bus rolled past with an ad about trust. I let it pass. Ads are not promises. My phone stayed in my pocket. I did not check for messages. I did not need an opinion from a screen. The difference between what was said and what was done had closed to 0 for a moment, and that was enough for now. The important part was that Eli's morning would not tilt without warning. The important part was that I had used a door, not a window. I walked along the side of the terminal to the planted strip where city workers keep winter soil ready for spring. I thought about the seed packets on our counter and the way Eli turns the pot a quarter turn for even light. I decided to buy potting soil on the way home. The decision felt small and heavy at once. It felt like a string tied to something that would not move in wind. Behind the glass, the concourse kept its regular heartbeat. People met, left, arrived, and stood. The chime sounded again and told the time to anyone who needed it. I put my hand on the metal rail by the steps and felt the cold run into my palm. I let the cold be a fact. I let it sit there and make me calm. When I reached the corner, the light was red. I stopped and waited like a person who knows how to stop and wait. In the distance, a ferry horn sounded from the river and then faded. I do not connect every sound to a story. I choose the sounds that help me stand. The light changed, I crossed. Inside the terminal, the action I started was ending in the way such actions end, clearly, publicly, with enough witnesses to make rumor smaller. I did not need to see the final expressions to know the shape. The shape was simple. It had taken me days to build it with small facts. Mugs on opposite counters, a new key on a ring, a reflection in glass, a child's question, a circle on a wall calendar, a note that said, "Bring forms," a file tree named Archive A and Archive B, a blank page from a printer placed like a bookmark in time, a sentence sent without heat. I will handle this properly. I walked toward the bus stop at the far edge where local routes start their loops. The schedule posted in the plexiglass case matched the one in my head. Lines and times aligned. A small satisfaction rose and then settled. I stood there and let the city be itself. I thought of Eli's roots and the way roots hold. I thought of doors. I thought of nothing for a full minute, which is a gift most days do not give. In the Rivergate concourse, the packet is served in public view as the departure chime rings. The printer at the kiosk spools a receipt. I step into daylight, cut to black.